Okay, well, thank you for joining our Introduction to Portfolio webinar. We actually, we have a very large number of attendees signed up, and so there are people still trickling in, but I'm gonna go ahead and get started here in a moment. There's also been a lot of changes in the space at Atlassian since our last webinar. We've been to Summit, we've seen the acquisition of AgileCraft, that's been incorporated into Jira Align, and we'll be talking about that as a part of this webinar. We'll also be getting into more detail regarding Jira Align and the positioning with portfolio and where they both fit with customers, because they do fit in very different customer bases. But we will also be getting into more of the tool specific questions and differences in our advanced portfolio class that is slated for next week. It's a half day, and I believe Heather could post the link to that class, or you can find it on our website at expium.com under events. So with that, this is the Introduction to Portfolio webinar, and my name is Michael McNeil. I'm a principal here at Expium. I've been working with Jira and Portfolio since their inception almost. I guess Jira for over 10 years and Portfolio for ever since it showed up in the marketplace and Jira at Portfolio 1.x. So we've done about, I guess, a dozen of these webinars, and we'll be rolling through a lot of new content this time. So we'll get through it as quickly as possible. I drank an extra couple cups of coffee so I can fit all the words in. So as a part of the agenda, we'll be going over, we'll be introducing some concepts and ideas. Excuse me. And we will actually be spending as much of the time as possible in the tool looking at portfolio plans, looking at how they're put together and some of the outcomes that you can have from having good portfolio implementations. So jumping right in, introduction, we now have two products in this particular project management space within the Atlassian suite. We have Portfolio for Jira, and we have Jira Align. Jira Align came from the acquisition of AgileCraft, which was a large at-scale, and we'll talk about that, project management platform that's primarily positioned around SAFe. Those have been being incorporated into the Atlassian suite, that product, and is being relabeled or renamed Jira Align. They've done a really good job of bringing that team in-house. We've had many meetings with those folks. They're very sharp, and a lot of great things opening up with this acquisition. So the positioning of the two products are very different. When you think about portfolio fits very well in a space where you have a team and you're trying to roadmap that team's product development, or you have a team of teams, so you have a number of teams and all their work is rolling up into a single roadmap. And then you have, in terms of portfolio, you also have the ability to do things like Agile, Kanban, Scrum, kind of Agile Fall, any kind of Scrum variant that you do, or any kind of Kanban variant, even traditional project management. Now, when you move to Align, you're talking about a product that doesn't have a huge customer base. Portfolio is in the tens of thousands of companies using it. Align is in the 50 to 100 category, but the 50 to 100 are very large. So they're Fortune 5, they're Fortune 100 companies that are actually using this for at-scale management, way beyond anything that we try to do with portfolio. So they're very different spaces, and Align fits very well where you're talking about many teams of teams. So where we would think, so you might actually use portfolio to manage a product group or a team of a group of developers that are working on a particular product. You actually might use its features to help build a roadmap for that team. And then you might use Align to incorporate a large portfolio of products. I'm sorry to use that term again, but a large portfolio of products across a very large organization as they roll up, and the executive team needs to see how that works, and they need to be able to push ideas from the executive team down into the space. So there's And so then, and Align is also very much oriented towards true scaled agile. So the SAFe framework, if you're implementing that or you're implementing something very close to that, Align is probably a very good tool. Because of the nature of the tool, it is not at this point in time, it is not as configurable as many other aspects of Jira. It's flexible, it's very strong, but it's very strong in a very specific vein. And the analogy that I've been seeing is it's very strong in the same way that the original Agile tools in Jira were very strong for a specific way of working, but they didn't have the configurability that they have today. And I think we'll see that over time with Align, where more configurability, more customization will come about. So I'm going to jump into portfolio for Jira here for a few minutes, and then I'm going to talk, after I do that, I'm going to talk for a few minutes again about Align. So portfolio for Jira developed, it's now a third version is out, 3.x, that incorporates a new UI. I would tell you that our position on 3.x is that it's really good for some projects, but they have made a very smart move in that the same projects can exist in the Jira instance, and you can have 2.x plans alongside 3.x plans. This is very similar to where they supported the classic plans back in version 1.x of portfolio. In this case, there are a lot of features in 2.x that may or may not make it to 3.x that customers are using. So there may be people that continue to use the 2.x UI for quite some time. So there's we'll be talking about, and I've got plans that are in here, and just to give you a quick, just so you can see it, this is a 2.x plan, and this is the same plan in 3.x. So you can see there's quite a variation in terms of the UI. And next week in the advanced class, we will be getting more into this, and especially into the use cases of where you would use one versus the other. Because frankly, by next week, the data we would push out now would be somewhat obsolete. So because they are adding features to this particular 3.x constantly, but it is not a fit for everybody. So going back to the slides here, when you think about Jira, the Agile boards, portfolio, when you start thinking about these things, Jira is very much tracking all kinds of data so you can understand what's happened in the past. So you have your dashboards, your reports, your indices, your KPIs, whatever you're doing. All of those are constantly calculated, and you can see how things are going, and you can see it based on the past. Agile boards are really all about the present. What's the current sprint that we're in? What's the current version that we're in? What are we developing? What's the current pile of work we're trying to accomplish towards a milestone if you're in traditional project management side? What are these things? What is this date we're dealing with, and when are we going to get done? When you use an Agile board, you use a Kanban board, or you use the Scrum tools, you are definitely here dealing with the present. Well, portfolio gives you a view of the present, but it is focused on the future. And this is often a misconception that people have. Portfolio doesn't replace your use of Agile boards. Portfolio augments the other two things. So that when we see a successful customer, we see them using dashboards, reports, building indicators. We see them using the Agile tools, and then we see them using portfolio. And often we'll have a development manager that has, 2 large monitors on their desk, like I'm using right at this moment. And they might have those 3 things up across the large monitors. And they might have them concurrently. We see Scrum teams do their stand-ups with portfolio and the Agile boards up at the same time. And sometimes we have those incorporated together into a dashboard or into some other visualization tool. So there's some real, you really have to have an understanding of which parts of the Atlassian suite are about the past, which parts are about the present, and which parts are about the future. And if you know portfolio is about the future, then it can be a lot less frustrating when you go to use it, because they haven't even tried to make it a tool that you would use to manage your everyday work, even though there are certainly some things you can do in it, as we will get into in a little bit. There are some blockers for using portfolio. The number one thing that we see is we see the lack, and we'll talk about this more in a minute, we see the lack of an effective and consistent issue type assignment within customer instances. For example, epics. Epics can mean very different things from organization to organization, and that's not really a problem. What becomes a problem is it can mean very different things from team to team or from product to product. So if you're trying to incorporate multiple teams together, governance really becomes an issue. So the governance, the issue type structure, and how that will be mapped to what we refer to as a hierarchy in portfolio really become the major blockers for using portfolio. Other blockers include kind of some of the set of data and how and dependencies. So some organizations have chosen to track dependencies outside of the issue link feature within Jira. Well, portfolio uses the issue link feature, blocking, blocker, and any other custom links that you've created to actually generate dependencies. So that dependency mapping, which is really one of the major pluses of portfolio, the ability to see cross-project dependencies and be able to create cross-project releases and bundles of work, though you actually can't do that without those pieces being in place. So there are some needs to have those be in place. And then kind of the last blocker we see is just folks that have not been keeping up to date with, say, their Jira server instance, and they're quite a ways behind. And so there's some things that really needs to be brought up to at least close to recent version, a later 7.x version, if not 8.x. And then you can really move forward and use a portfolio effectively. I think the latest version on server is 7.13. And we saw after 7.10 or 11 that things really got smooth with portfolio. So as we move forward, another way we like to view it, and we need to take the time, we're trying to see how this all shakes out with a line and the positioning of the two products to generate some new graphics. But this is a less pretty view of kind of what makes portfolio tick. So you have your data in your Jira instance. Well, we have to get that data, and that's the intake portion, into portfolio. And that's what I was talking about in terms of the blockers. You have to map issue types to a hierarchy level, which we'll talk about in a minute. And you have to bring in certain fields, and they have to be, consistent. You have to have dates. You need to have some estimates. There's some things that you need to be able to bring in, and that data needs to be able to come in. And then once we get that data in, we need to be able to view it effectively. And that view actually hits on another blocker where we need to be able to incorporate, and we'll show this again in more detail in a little bit, especially in the class next week. You need to be able to identify what work's going to be done by different teams if portfolio is going to display that work being associated with that team's effort. So if you have 5 teams, you need to be able to differentiate in your filters or in your boards that drive portfolio between the work that will be done by each team predictively. And that doesn't mean they all have to be assigned to individuals. You might have a field that identifies, but you're probably going to have a filter using some JQL skills that are going to basically tease out of your backlog and all the work that's coming into the bucket of work that the 5 teams will take on, which work will go to each team. That's something, if you think about capacity planning, if you think about trying to map a roadmap, that's kind of a very important piece of information to gather. So that instructs then the view. So we've got the data coming in from Jira, we bring that into portfolio via the intake, then we create these views of the data that are portfolio plans or programs. And then the key to all this is we want to be able to make good decisions. So when we do a portfolio integration, we come in, first thing we're asking is, what decisions are you trying to make? And then we list those out, and we figure out what's the view that needs to happen in order to instruct those decisions. And then we go to the data intake, and then we do the data, we make data changes, and then we roll back up and we leave with plans that actually work. This is a very important kind of idea. So now you can see then when we start looking at Jira Align, which is kind of the other side, and this is the slide that's courtesy of the Jira Align team that they sent over to me. You're talking about something that rides on top of Jira and has all kinds of constructs that Jira doesn't have inside of it. So, you know, you've got the team that might be working in Jira using the things that I just talked about to make decisions about their particular pillar of work, but you might have 5 different pillars of a very large organization flowing into an executive management planning process. So you have programs and solutions, and then a portfolio above that that's different than the portfolio for Jira. And then you have, and then that all instructs the enterprise. So what I just described for portfolio for Jira is really down at that team or team of teams level, and Align really sits up on top of that. So there's going to be a lot of detail next week related to more of this positioning and how it works. There's a whole slide that I won't use today of how the hierarchy in Jira maps to the lower part of the hierarchy in Jira Align, and then what happens at those higher levels as you get up into the organization. And we've seen this as been rolling out portfolio for Jira, where there was just a higher level of abstraction needed to be able to roll up thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of staff into a single view. So then when we roll down, here's what, this is not sanctioned by Atlassian. This is a guy that's been using the portfolio tools and project management his entire career. I might even delete this section before it goes on to the on the YouTube channel. But here's my just blunt opinion about where all this is. I'm really excited about both of these tools. I hope we can do a really good job of not confusing the community of users and the customer base around them. I think there is real potential for that. And I will say that with the acquisition of Align, once it gets more flexibility, I think it needs to be a very strong product offering with a lot of emphasis and focus and configurability from the Atlassian side. I actually think the features of portfolio for Jira, much like if you go back through history, you look at Greenhopper and when it was brought into the Atlassian fold, that's a set of agile tools that we know today as the agile boards. You can even see in Jira Server, you can still see some Greenhopper references, at least last time I looked in the file structure. That was originally a separate product, and it was eventually part of the table stakes feature set of Jira. I actually think the road mapping features and the rest of portfolio really need to be a part of Jira itself. We'll see if they decide to go that route. They've gone that route in the past. I think that would be the wisest decision. And I would see that as a real possibility. Again, my opinion, not sanctioned by Atlassian. I do not think that portfolio for Jira will go away, not even in the slightest. So they do not overlap, and I hope nobody from GM is on this webinar. But it's like comparing a Cadillac to a Bentley. They're just different market spaces. They're different buyers, different user sets, different strata of society. So it's a whole different idea. So back to portfolio for Jira and the task at hand, and I will try to roll through this effectively and get us into the tool in the next little bit so we can actually look at the UI and look at how this thing works and some examples of how it works. First and foremost, portfolio under the covers has a scheduling engine, and you need to instruct that scheduling engine in terms of what are we doing with all of this work, and then what's the priority, who's going to do the work, how's it, what are its dependencies. You can't schedule work in an automated way without the right inputs. So the garbage in, garbage out concept that we've heard in tech my whole career that's a reality here. So we have a machine algorithm that is absolutely trying to do its best job of scheduling. If we give it good data, you will get good data out. Also, it's important to note many people pull up Portfolio thinking they're using Microsoft Project. It's not. You do not have to set all the dates, even though in 3.x they give you more capability of doing that. You actually fight against the scheduling engine when you try to explicitly schedule everything. Now, you can explicitly schedule everything. You just need to know that until you get it all scheduled, some weird things are going to be happening on the screen because you have a scheduling algorithm that's running in the background. Now, once you incorporate all your dates, once you get all your information, that scheduling algorithm looks at everything and says, oh, everything's manually scheduled. I don't have to worry about it. But until that point, people can get very frustrated because they kind of get it in their head that we can schedule about half the work and things should just happen. So another key concept that's really becoming mainstream in the Atlassian ecosystem is this idea of an unlimited hierarchy. So they've done a great thing. They took originally there was this epic link idea where epics had stories that were a part of them. And this epic link field was very powerful in terms of building that relationship. Well, now we have a parent link field, and that parent link field can be used to develop an unlimited hierarchy of issues. So you can have a 12-layer deep hierarchy. And if you do that, then you maintain that and you build great processes around that, that can do some great things when it comes into Portfolio, because Portfolio is built to take a hierarchy of issues and allow you to roll things up. And so there's one question that came in on the Q&A: can multiple portfolios roll up to enterprise level for reporting? And I won't necessarily be able to get to all the questions, but it applies right here where we're at. One thing that I should state is Portfolio is configurable on a per instance basis. So if you have multiple instances, there are ways to take that data and aggregate them and move them into something like Power BI and aggregate multiple sets of data. But Portfolio as a tool will be kind of an opportunity to roll up things from within that instance. And if the instance gets large enough, you have to be really smart about how you put that together. But the short answer is yes, at an instance level. If you need to aggregate 5 instances together into an executive management platform, that is exactly where Jira Align fits. It actually can incorporate multiple instances of Jira and pull them into a single executive management level of reporting. And then there's also a connector for Jira Align that connects to major BI tools. So it takes the database, does a transformation of the data so it can be consumed by a BI tool. But back to Portfolio, this unlimited hierarchy is a really important concept. So we can have on a simple level, you can have initiatives that drive epics, that drive stories, that drive tasks or subtasks. And then you can also add more layers. So you could have initiatives that drive major epics, that drive stories. Or you could have initiatives that drive features, that drive epics, that drive story. There's many ways that you can do this, and it's very flexible in its configuration, just like everything else in Jira. So then there's the idea of themes, and I only kept this on the slide because I've covered it in all of our other webinars. But themes are going away with future versions of Portfolio. Essentially, it was a way you can do this in other mechanisms in Jira. It's a pie chart where you can apply a formula to a pie chart. So we can build that in other places in Jira. It's not a required feature, so it's not really something that's going away. It's something that we will just do in another way within Jira. But I thought I'd mention it because it was something that they were starting to incorporate into the process of Portfolio. And I think they realized that it really was duplicating functionality that was already elsewhere in Jira with dashboards and the pie chart tools and other add-ons that are apps that are in the ecosystem. So another very important area of differentiation between Jira, Portfolio, and even Portfolio 2.x and Portfolio 3 is this next section of teams, stages, and skills. And we will get into this a lot more in our class next week because it's 4 hours long, not 1 hour long. But we have this idea that came into portfolio of shared teams. It's a very powerful concept. We can group people by the teams that they're on. And if somebody is on 5 teams, it's very easy and straightforward to represent that. And I'll be showing that. It's in my 3rd tab above. So once we do that, then there was this idea, and much like themes, this next idea is going to end up going away, which is there was this idea of that work goes through stages. And there was just too much overlap. And we've seen customers that have implemented stages and they use it very well. But you can imagine if there's stages of work that an item is going through, that sounds kind of analogous to a workflow. So workflow process is kind of what replaces the stages in Portfolio 3.x. And so we can show that. We can also show it in 2.x. So we're not using stages in many of our new portfolio implementations with our client base, because that is being deprecated in future versions of portfolio. We also have this idea of skills, and skills in version 2.x are attributed to the individual, and skills currently, as it's being contemplated in 3.x, are actually kind of being considered to be attributed to a team. So it'll be interesting to see where skills go, but they're certainly not breaking any of the extensive implementation of skills that we have in our customer base. Skills can provide a great visualization into capacity planning. So if capacity planning and understanding a limited resource within your delivery chain, that can be very powerful. I would not recommend it to track every skill across the organization, but I would identify those skills that you need to expose the backlog of work, whether it's a particular engineering group, or maybe your release engineers, or project management, or your business analysts, or your architects. There could be something in your process that you need to expose. Skills are a great way to do that, and I'll show you that in a plan here in a bit. Then there's a great feature in 2.x, and again, because 3.x isn't finished yet, we don't know exactly where that's going to land. But this idea of scenarios. So if you think of portfolio data, it's really, if you use a source control kind of model, it's a branch of the data in Jira. So it takes all of the data from Jira, and you can update it, and you can bring it up to date anytime you want by hitting the calculate button. But you get to play with that data, and then you get to decide whether you push those changes back to Jira. So you have the opportunity to have 3 managers, for instance, take the same set of data and plot a potential roadmap, decide which plan you like, or a combination of the plans that you like, and then make that your reality in Jira. There's this idea of scenario planning that is very powerful, especially if you're looking at staffing changes or changing the configuration of your teams to improve your work output. That can be very powerful for your organization. And that's where scenarios come in. And I'll show you a little bit about that. And again, we get into it very deeply next week. The last one I already talked about, which is dependency management, and especially cross-project dependencies. That's a very important concept. So I do have, there's a whole process that goes into portfolio governance, and we held a governance summit out in California a couple months ago. Had quite a bit of good data. You can see it's about a 3-hour presentation. It's on our YouTube channel. And part of that is portfolio. So you can't have a good set of portfolio plans unless you have good governance in your Jira instance. So one of the things that we see is that a lot of good practices come into place so that information like what I'm showing you on the screen can come into Jira. So within portfolio, there's a hierarchy. Now, when you turn on portfolio and you look at it for the first time, you're basically going to see an agile hierarchy. I've intentionally, if you look at the center of the screen here, we've intentionally genericized that to emphasize the fact that you can make this be what you want. So you're going to have epic, story, and subtask as kind of your initial setup. But you can take that, and when we extrapolate that out into we try to come up with names that make sense for a particular client, and we build that out in portfolio. And then what happens is you actually assign your issue types from Jira to that level of the hierarchy. So if you had a software project where you had epics, stories, and subtasks, you might assign epic, like in this example, to tier 2. You might assign story to tier 3. And then if you had project management projects, you might assign project to tier 2, and you might assign milestones to tier 3, so that you can actually look at those two types of work together in the same roadmap, in the same plan. Because you might have some traditional project management that impacts your software delivery. So there might be, for example, we've had clients that were building out a new data center, and that data center would let them hit a level of compliance to be able to offer features in their software that they couldn't before because of regulation. So there was actually this physical connection between construction and software delivery, and they were able to map that as a part of a portfolio roadmap. So these are important concepts, and we even show another idea, and we actually have an Agile HR webinar that we do, where we actually show how you can use some of these same concepts for that type of work as well. So now I'm going to give you a literally 1 minute kind of run through of who we are and what we do, and then we'll be back and we'll start jumping into the tool. So at Expium, we provide training, consulting, custom development, and it's important to know that these are pretty deep. So we have a full suite of classes. All of this is our own curriculum. We don't use other folks' classes. We generate our own curriculum. They're very workshop based. They're very interactive. And we actually try to help people solve their real problems. They're actually working in the tools throughout the class. We have a class, I think, going in Washington, D.C. this week, or was it New York this week? It must be New York this week, which is a Jira boot camp and a Confluence boot camp. And those are live. We offer many of these live, private, and in person. And we've had great success with these over the last 4 or 5 years. For consulting, we end up dealing with very large instances and things like portfolio. We probably do as many portfolio engagements as we do anything else. And then that kind of expands into governance for Jira and some of the ideas around using Jira at scale. And so we end up dealing with a lot of those pieces, but we also offer customized Jira configuration engagements. And then we do ongoing support and service for our clients, including helping with the licenses, co-terming, et cetera. Now, what's very different about us is we have a sister company, Oasis Digital, that is an enterprise software development company. And so we have some apps in the marketplace that have been developed as custom integrations for clients. And so we have these, we build these, we actually build enterprise software for clients, and we actually use these tools to manage our projects. So I use Portfolio to deliver enterprise projects to very large companies that we build software for. And we sometimes incorporate their teams into our instance, and we incorporate data coming in from their instance to build that. So we're actually a user of the tools in addition to being able to configure the tools. That gives us kind of a unique perspective. We also have a deep enterprise development team. So if we need to build something, we can build something, and we can build it quickly. We built a complete custom UI for Volkswagen a few years ago. We spoke about it at Summit. We've built a number of custom UIs since, where the users don't even know they're in Jira. They're using maybe an internal application, and they actually do the functions in Jira from within that internal application. We do that quite a bit for clients because of that skill set. So back to the task at hand. We've got we have a question that just came in. We've actually been pulled into one of AgileCraft's largest clients to help with an integration. We're in flight and in process right now. So yes, we are able to work at the enterprise level and work with Jira Align. So we are already in process with that, and we are live with a customer already. So that was a question from Carla. So so now running into this, so we have some key concepts that one last set of key concepts I want to cover is we have these plan types. And so you can have these plan types that are around project management, repetitive tasks, program management, human resources, capacity planning, release planning. You can see the list here. There's a wide variety of uses for portfolio. And we even call it there are even portfolio plans that we kind of refer to as the plan of shame. So for example, we had a large client that had thousands and thousands of epics that had never been closed. And if any of you are Jira experts, you will know why that likely is. So their epics were never closed out. And so they had a portfolio plan where they displayed all of those epics and they broke it up by team. And essentially, as the epics were cleaned out, they disappeared from the plan. So, and eventually it was just a couple of project managers left and they rolled that out. So that was just that was a very recent thing. But so you can actually use some of these things. And I will touch on that, Walter, here in just a little bit as we get into things. So these are the various types of plans and their uses. We also have plan types related to the individual user. So you can have an individual plan. Say you have an architect that works on 5 different teams. He might want to have a plan where he understands the dates, the releases, and the critical path for all the items that he needs to work on. And his manager might want to see what he needs to be focused on and what his priority list looks like. Then there's the team level. So we can see you could have a Scrum team that has their own plan and the roadmap of the work and the upcoming sprints that they've got all laid out coming in. You might have a manager that's looking at many Scrum teams. You could have an executive that's looking at a total product portfolio. And then you can have things like critical items, like a key bug list, and on the special and then you can have a special access. So you're looking at all of a particular industry or a client. There are very specific plan types. So think of a portfolio plan much like you think of an Agile board. Or a dashboard. You can create it for a specific purpose for the use of an individual or a team. So it's a very flexible, configurable tool in that way. So, all right, so now I want to get into the actual tool itself. So I'm going to be using a Jira server instance. Let me move my window around here so that the Zoom controls don't get in my way. All right, so when you drop into Jira, if you have a server instance, you're going to see this type of a view. And if you're in a cloud instance, you're primarily only going to see the plan level view. So programs are groupings of plans. So for example, I have a demo program view here, and inside of that are these 2 portfolio plans. And then I have 5 portfolio plans that are not assigned to a program. So this is basically a hierarchy where you can get into these. If I click into a plan, I can see a set of breadcrumbs at the top that show me I'm in portfolio, I'm in a program, and I can see this. Now, if I hit a particular one that is not in a program, you can see that the breadcrumbs show that I'm just in portfolio and I'm in my plan. So there's a natural kind of organization on the Jira side, on the portfolio side and server to allow you to operate at a larger level. Some of these features can be built out into cloud as well as you need to grow. So when I drop into the plan, this is a 2.x plan, and it's important. We're still seeing our customer base primarily using 2.x because of the feature richness of it. And what they're doing is if they have where 3.x fits really well is if you have Scrum teams that are really following the Scrum process, 3.x works really well. If you're in if you're in capital A Agile Scrum, then 3.x works really well. As they incorporate more flexible features, some of the other use cases will come in. and we'll talk about that more extensively next week. But Portfolio 2.x supports a wider variety of use cases. And actually, I think it actually may have some value longer term. We'll see what the portfolio team decides to do with that. We've been having a number of conversations. This is Portfolio for Server. And we'll talk about that here in, yes. So I've already had a question come in from Gus that is, yes, that's probably talking about, so this is 2.x, here's 3.x. So I'm primarily talking about, you can actually, I'll be looking at both. I understand it's just recently they started dropping people by default into the 3.0 view, but there are some very significant things that are very valuable in the 2.x view, and we'll probably switch the webinar to and the class next week to start talking half and half about these, and eventually probably 2/3 about the new view. But you can actually drive yourself back to the old view very easily if it's enabled. If you click the gear icon and configure planning interface, you can actually move back to the 2.x view. So just like they do with many other Jira features, you can come back, you can move back and forth. So go back to the plan here. But I do want to, because many people are still using the 2.x interface, and that'll continue for some time. We've got, so the 2.x interface is built where you have two panes of information. You have the top pane and the bottom pane. The top is a schedule. The bottom is, when you drop into it, is a scope view. These two are combined views when you go to 3.x. So if you can see, I've got my target start, target end, and status and estimate fields here. Well, down here, I've got my estimates, and I can add my target start and target end fields here if I wanted to. And I can have my releases over on 3.x. I can add my, I do have the same idea. I can add my releases here. So essentially what they've done, you can see the schedule views here to the right and the tabular views here to the left. In 2.x, the tabular views at the bottom and the schedule views at the top. So they've changed the orientation of it. The application generally works much the same way. There are some differences in the UI. For example, in Portfolio 2.x, you pick the level that you want to look at. All right, so now I'm looking at the sprint level. And if you note right here, I have both Scrum and Kanban on the same board. So the JUC team is a Kanban team. The CLD team is a Scrum team, and I can see their sprints and I can see their work in, work out on the Kanban side. Here, I'm looking at, I can again choose the level of hierarchy. And if I drop down, then it's a little bit different if I group by team. So if I look at the JUC team, I start to see dates at this level. Assignments, these are in buckets very similar to that are going to be aligned with sprints, and then it rolls up. But there's a much better way to do this in this particular, in 3.x. And that is they've added a new feature where I can look inside of. So I can kind of break down and I can see what's inside this particular epic. I can see these work items. I can see how they relate to the overall epic schedule and how that goes together. And I can do this on a per item basis, and I can expand out that. So this is one of the great enhancements in the UI, but there is not as good of coverage for Kanban and Scrum teams and for things like you're trying to track, different types of work outside of, if you're just doing software development and you're primarily doing Scrum, start using the 3.x view. If you're not, I would encourage you to disable the new view and use 2.x. So when I go back to 2.x, I have a lot of capabilities and features. Here I can switch, so my navigation for the bottom pane is up here at the right, in the top right. I had my scope view up, which was the tabular view of my issues. I can switch to team views here. I can see who is on these teams, and I can kind of explore their schedule. Now, when I get to the team view, it's very important for us to understand the shared teams functionality. There is a separate permission in Jira that is just about managing these teams that you see below. So I'm going to show you that interface really quickly. We'll get into it more next week in the advanced class. So it was actually part of my example. So when I drop into the shared teams view, and if somebody has the shared teams permission and they don't have project permissions, they will be able to drop in here. They'll be able to manage the teams, the assignment of people to the teams, and some of the details around it. For example, you can take a particular individual and you can understand their vacation schedule, when they start and end on a team, what their weekly hours rate is on a per team basis, and you can expand that and you can set that out, set that up for each team. So there's a lot of granular capabilities there. There's going to be a lot of questions around the usage of the tool. I don't have time to do a complete tool walkthrough here. This is an introduction. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to show you quickly a bunch of plan types so that you can see the outcomes of the tool. And if you need help building out your plans, we can help in very small ways, or we can help in very large ways. So we have a wide variety. Please reach out to us at team@expium.com. But I'm going to roll through some of these plans, the different use cases, and help you understand. And then in the class next week, I will get into more detail. So you can find that link, or we can send that link out to the participant list after this class. So after this webinar related to the class. So this particular plan is really important in that, if you notice, I've got it broken up here. I'm going to group this by team, where I can see this is a WH plan with dependencies. So this particular group is dependent upon external teams to complete their work. And in fact, I can see that if I highlight this item, I can see this particular item can't happen within my team, within the scope of my team's work, until this particular item is done by another team that I don't have control over. So the ability to surface and visualize threats to the schedule that are outside of your team is really important, and something that we build into our engagements. Now, if I go down a level and I look at it, I can begin to see the critical path through my work. So I might not only see items that are outside, so I know that I can see the overall impact. So the critical path through all these issues is coming through this item from this external team. And the critical path, and it turns out they're dependent upon this item as well. And I can look at some of these others. So this particular team is driving all these items that are scheduled for sprint 6 and 7. So there's a lot of, and then I can see that this particular item is dependent upon all of these issues. So there's a lot of things that can be exposed here. This work is dependent upon this earlier work. I can begin to see what's really the critical path through the work in the project. This is an example of a team view, and we encourage people to build plans that incorporate any external links that are to their work. And I know I've harped on that a little bit, but it's really important. And you can expose that in 3.x as well. So I can see here that I've got dependencies. Let me close this guy up. I can see that I've got some dependencies here, and I can, if I click on it, I can see that some of the details around that dependency. And so it's really valuable to be able to see some of the data and how things interface, and I can see the number of dependencies. So if I drop down level in the hierarchy here, I can see that there are 6 dependencies here. Here's all the dependencies for this item. So there's some real nice things that come about in both of these UIs for external dependencies. Now there are other types of, there was a question here about rolling up multiple plans. So there are two ways to do that. So there is the program view, which is the kind of built-in view where you can assign things, assign plans as a part of a program. Or there's something we found more useful, which is what we refer to as the plan of plans, that allows you to pull multiple plans together, see their release schedule, see the cross-project dependencies, and actually visualize the projects across a number of teams or different types of work. Very powerful and very relevant to many of our customers. The program view is really a read-only view. Doesn't allow you to edit issues, but you can still look at items. You can look at a scope of work and you can choose what some fields that are shown, and you can see a schedule. This is great for an executive manager if everything can kind of flow into a program view in server or data center. So now, but if I go to the plan of plans, I actually have the opportunity here. I can close out my schedule and I can see my list of issues and I can actually edit all these issues. So I can see across many different projects and many different teams, a lot of the interactions, a lot of the item, the parent link in the hierarchy, progress, release assignment. I can do a lot of things editing around this. So that's kind of there's two roll-up types of approaches. One is what we call the plan of plans, where it is a portfolio plan that then incorporates a number of teams and their particular data. And then there is a program, which is a built-in feature in type of portfolio for Jira server or data center, where you actually assign a plan to a program, and it's a read-only type of view. So there are two different approaches, two different looks to the UI, and we've seen customers use both for different purposes. For example, a development manager might very much use this, but if they want to create a view for the C-suite, they might use this type of view because it doesn't dig down as deep. It doesn't go down to the story level. It just goes down to the epic level. So a couple other good pieces of information. Here's an example of a very complex plan that uses the stages and skills feature within portfolio. So here we have 3 stages: design, implementation, and testing. And for example, inside the design, we have both design and architecture. And then inside implementation, we have specific skills of front-end database, scripts, business logic, could be back-end integrations, could be visualizations, could be GraphQL for example. There could be very specific skills that you need to track that can be implemented here, and we'll show how to implement those skills in our class next week. And then so there's some good data in here, and in particular, I can see I got this color coded by the stages, so I can see that my design work happens in the initial sprint and early on in the process. And then I can see that my implementation work in red begins to happen over these sprints. And I can see then the testing and deployment of those same features. So this is an example of a plan for a specific purpose. I have a very big, large initiative and I need to track that progress. Now there's a piece of portfolio that I haven't shown yet, and that's the capacity planning side. So I can also begin to look at this from a capacity view, and I can do this in the other plans as well. But more importantly, I can begin to look at this at an individual level. So I can see individual staff members and their capacity and how this will work. And if and I can do that even in these other plans I was looking at earlier. If I switch to the capacity view here, I can see the capacity and the assigned capacity of the external teams alongside my own capacity, whether it be in terms of Scrum and the top and the first and third, and Kanban in the middle. So there's some very interesting views here. Now I can also, in this more complex view, if I go back to the schedule view, I can actually look at the issue assignment at the sprint level by person also. So I can begin to see what items are assigned over the coming sprints, what's the algorithm assigning versus what's coming in. Now, an important note here is if you're bringing in Scrum boards, it will respect your assignment of issues and your sprint planning. If you bring in just filters, it doesn't know about your sprint planning, and so it will assign. So that's actually a decision point when you start to build out portfolio. And then I want to show you one example. We're going to go a little over today, so please hang on. I'll be getting to questions, and I'll try to run through those as quickly as I can once I finish this last example. So we're going to, this is an example that we did for an accounting firm where we built out a process related to audit work. So in this case, this is a different use of the hierarchy. So here at tier 1, we have customers. If I go to tier 2, I begin to see the customer contracts. And then I start to see the specific work that is assigned as a part of that contract as I roll down through the hierarchy. And then I can see the individual tasks that are assigned as a part of that work. So if I go back up to the top level and I close out this schedule, this is where you can see, okay, I've got an example here of a client. Here are the 2 contracts we have with that client. Here's a particular chunk of a deliverable that needs to be done for that client. And then here are the tasks that make up that deliverable. You can see this has nothing to do with software development, but it's a very powerful visualization of the work within the organization. And this can be visualized because of the way we've built out portfolio alongside software development projects for the purposes of management. So that's my quick run through. I'm going to run through some of these questions as quickly as I can. So thank you for hanging on for those. So first off, I answered Carla's question here. Let's see. So Walter, is capacity management part of portfolio 3.x or just not available yet? I had many discussions at Summit with the portfolio team. I believe that they talked about capacity planning in terms of being in development. They didn't commit to anything, but that's definitely, I think that's definitely something they have on their radar. The real question is, will they implement capacity in 3.x at the team level or at the individual level? We'll see. We'll see how that shapes out. And then what is, Adore, what is your take on small companies trying to transition to full agile, disband PMO or incorporated? If so, and how it would be, what are the key benefits for PMO using Jira? So there's 2 questions there. If you were going to full scaled agile and disbanding a PMO, Jira Align might come right into your crosshairs as a valuable tool. If you're wanting a tool for the PMO, that'll also incorporate agile concepts, portfolio will work very well for that, as I was just kind of showing you. But it's very important how you set it up. So it's really, I would encourage you to get in touch with us for help in that regard. How do I switch to 3.x in Jira Cloud? That is an administrative feature. 3.x in Cloud is going to be an interesting animal. So we will hopefully know more on that for our advanced class next week. But right now, with Cloud, what you see is what you get. And as they come into, I think your administrator can, as new visualizations get enabled for your instance, I think they can turn on the advanced view as an option. At least that's what's available in ours. So also, how to see programs feature in Portfolio Cloud. The programs feature does not exist in Portfolio Cloud. What we see in Portfolio Cloud is what I referred to as the plan of plans in this, and we can help you with the construction of such an animal. But this is the view that you can do in Cloud versus the program view, which is available in Server and Data Center only. If I switch to 3.x, all users looking at that plan will see that view. Looking at that plan, yes. What we actually encourage people to do, I'm in the same instance. I have the same project available in 2.x and 3.x. They're separate plans. So if I look at my portfolio list, I see the WHF project plan with dependencies as a 2.x plan, and I see it as a 3.x plan. They're two separate plans. So you can have both views of the same data. The portfolio view is part of Jira Portfolio, or the Expium plugin is definitely, Portfolio is an app that is a part of the Atlassian ecosystem that can be purchased from the marketplace. It is not an Expium plugin. So is the estimate rolling up the task below it? Yes. That is one of the great things that Portfolio does, is it rolls up release assignment, estimates, components. A lot of the fields that are in Jira will be rolled up in Portfolio, which is a fantastic feature and really helps with the visualization of projects. I notice some video. I don't understand, Christopher Reyes. I don't understand your question. Can you view the portfolio above the epic level? Yes, if you configure it, you can, for example, that's what, if I look at the plan of plans, this is the epic level. And if I have initiatives, I can see it at a higher level, and I can call those whatever I want. And there's even another level above that that we've configured, but we don't have any data in. But you have the opportunity, you could have 12 levels of the hierarchy. So it's very configurable. Is the estimate rolling up the task below? Yeah, can you view the portfolio? Yes. Does Jira Portfolio for products require adequate configuration of Jira? Yes, and that's what I was referring to early on about the blockers. You need to have good governance around how your projects are set up to use Jira, a portfolio for Jira effectively. Cynthia, we're deciding on whether this actual webinar will, I think this one will make it to the YouTube channel, because I think we have covered some really important concepts in here. So I'm expecting it to be moved to the YouTube channel shortly. Can you show how to fix lead time issues on Jira 3.x? That's definitely a part of our class next week. So we'll look at that next week. It's not something that's part of this webinar. How releases are managed in 3.x. Again, that's going to be something for our class. I don't have time here to go through that. And then Levi, I'd like to use this to see the portfolio of efforts in a company and have multiple teams assigned to each effort. Will Jira Portfolio allow me to assign multiple teams to each effort? And how would these roll up in a single effort? So yes, so essentially you would have it's at the team level. So essentially when you would set this up, you would have your individual teams, and then you would have a team that incorporates the other teams. And then in any plan where you wanted to roll up multiple teams into that effort, you would simply use a team that incorporated all of those users. Users can be on multiple teams at a time. That's just part of the configuration. So we would want to know a little more about your use case before making a final recommendation on exactly how to do it. But based on the question you have there, yes, I believe you can do that. So again, thank you all for coming. I know we've run over a little bit from our time allotted. Please reach out to us at team@expium.com, or feel free to reach out to me directly. We have a lot of offerings in this space, and large and small, and we can take on tasks of helping you roll out Portfolio for Jira or Jira Align. So thank you for attending, and have a great day.